The OSI teaches that everything in the universe happens according to the grand plan. But the stranger that arrived in Halcyon was an unplanned variable. From the moment he landed in Emerald Vale, his actions altered the course of history. The riots in Tartarus ended in a total victory for the board. Without any significant threats to challenge their power, the board asserted their control over the colony. The lifetime employment program began immediately, and the people of Halcyon did exactly what they were expected to do. They obeyed. Sophia Akande converted the labyrinth from a prison to a processing center. She jettisoned the original colonists out of the Hope and transformed the ship into a massive storage facility. One by one, the workers of Halcyon surrendered themselves to the program. They arrived with their families and their friends, their colleagues and their neighbors, and then, one by one, they marched into their stasis chambers. As the workers of Halcyon slept in their hibernation chambers, their settlements became ghost towns, left behind by the board to be reclaimed by nature. Only Byzantium remained, a shining beacon of civilization in an otherwise abandoned colony. The people of Byzantium spent the rest of their days gorging themselves on their stockpile of resources. As for the workers of Halcyon, they never felt the effects of the collapse. They never felt anything at all. With the board shuttering many of its smaller townships, Graham was never able to spread his ideals to Byzantium. On Monarch, however, the iconoclast movement swelled, forming the colony's hotbed of philosophical thought and freedom, a consistent counterpoint to the board's capitalist regime. Or so they viewed themselves, at least. The Byzantium elite find it endearing that those anarchistic hoopleheads are still allowed to breathe Halcyon air. Consumed by paranoia, Lilia Hagen took sublight salvage in a controversial direction, openly accusing board officials of an extraterrestrial conspiracy. One day, an accident at the Groundbreaker's docking bay silenced her forever. Time would tell if her replacement could keep the sublight family together. Edgewater's cannery met its production quota for the first time in 3 years. As a result, the adjutant rewarded every worker in Edgewater with a place in the lifetime employment program. Reed Dobson was granted 25 years in suspended animation. However, a computing error adjusted his duration to 250 years. A trouble ticket to resolve this error remains open. While the Groundbreaker remained mechanically stable, the changing times forced Junlei Tennyson to make some difficult calls on behalf of her community. The work of maintaining independence was an uphill climb, and she found herself caving to bad faith compromises with the board. Time will tell if the Groundbreaker can endure. As smaller settlements were swallowed up and their workers drafted into the lifetime employment program, Byzantium continued to thrive. While its citizens lived in decadence and extravagance, a small cadre of scientists worked to solve the nutrition crisis that threatened Halcyon. No one else much noticed the townships that disappeared from the map, or the luxuries that slowly lost their luster year by year. Even the Gorgon asteroid, though a distant enigma to most of Halcyon, felt the aftershocks of your actions. Gorgon's restored facilities presented a tantalizing boon to the lifetime employment program. The promise of a more productive, more compliant workforce. It was too good for Akande to pass up, especially when Tartarus and the many underperforming townships across Terra 2 offered fodder for additional research. Minnie Ambrose found herself leading the project under Akande's watchful eye. Her organizational acumen kept the project afloat, but just barely. With the specter of failure ever present, she came to appreciate the struggles the late Dr. Ambrose had faced. In spite of everything, the Gorgon asteroid remained a sobering reminder of the potential for progress and disaster in humanity's most ambitious efforts. Administrator Ludovico never lived to see the launch of Spectrum Brown. It happened in a private event in Byzantium to an elite gathering of dilettantes who wanted to sample the drink that killed Halcyon Helen. Spectrum Brown was briefly popular in the months following the lifetime employment program, but fell out of favor once Byzantines realized it couldn't dull the inevitable onset of ennui. The sheer volume of substances consumed by the average Byzantine had the effect of countering the parasite's influence. Host to the parasite rarely turned violent, and the few who did were discreetly rounded up and deposited outside the walls. The lifetime employment program led to a boom in the aetherwave industry as more and more Byzantines demanded entertainment. With the absence of Ruth Bellamy, the question on everyone's mind was, who could be the next Halcyon Helen? Burbage 3001's performance during the investigation on Eridanos made it the ideal contender for Helen's replacement. Some years later, after Odeon Pictures released the brand new Burbage 3002 model, it was found mysteriously destroyed by a plasma weapon. After Spectrum Brown's widespread distribution, Spencer Woolrich experienced a sudden upswing in his popularity. Viewers found his on-screen conduct to be more boisterous, energetic, and personable than ever before. The wide grin constantly beaming from his narrow face certainly helped fit his friendly image. When asked about his newfound on-screen charisma, Spencer had this to say: "Happy workers lead to happy customers. Happy customers are repeat customers." Bertie Holcomb adapted to his new role as a host for parasitic slugs surprisingly well. Perhaps because he wasn't using his brain for all that much in the first place. The slugs put a swift, if unorthodox, end to Bertie's fears of being valued solely for his tossball skills. Of all the infected in the colony, Bertie's wild, beaming smile would always be the most genuine. The prophet of profitability was not spared from the infection quickly overtaking Eridanos. Due to her newfound chronic delight, the prophet was no longer able to effectively advise her clients on productivity. Her disciples, similarly bliss-enwrapped, lost interest in the hot, cold walks and hourly purges. Despite all this, the prophet's spirits were hardly dampened. After all, she no longer had the capacity to worry about any of her business rivals. Your influence shifted Ellie's perspective. She finally admitted, albeit grudgingly, that she just might need other people. Sometimes. With a steady income from the life insurance payouts, she was finally able to afford a ship of her own. She hired a small crew and flew supply missions to communities on the fringe. Some of them were even legal. As the board reasserted control over Halcyon, Felix came to realize that his life as an upstart rebel had come to an end. The board's victory crushed any hope for a grand revolution across Halcyon, and so Felix once again found himself without a purpose in life. And so, disillusioned with his former boss and with nowhere left to go, Felix left his crew without saying goodbye. He was never heard from again. As a reward for his part in her courageous rescue, the adjutant invited the vicar known as Max to become one of the leaders of the Order of Scientific Inquiry. But Max had no interest in serving any organization, let alone the OSI, which he knew would never tolerate his heretical theories. Instead, he attempted to minister to the people of Byzantium. They rejected his ideas, being far too satisfied with their own material comforts. Disillusioned, Max gave up and left the city. He was never heard from again. Once the matter with the Hope colonists was resolved, Junlei bashfully asked Parvati if she'd like to join her permanently on the Groundbreaker, and Parvati enthusiastically, if somewhat awkwardly, agreed. As the board began to roll out their lifetime employment program, Parvati was increasingly plagued by dreams of freezing to death, and rarely left their shared quarters. Stymied by dwindling resources, Junlei struggled to keep the Groundbreaker afloat. Their relationship couldn't survive the strain. Parvati moved into crew quarters and found work servicing water pumps in hydroponics. Nyoka returned to Monarch to take another crack at making a permanent life for herself. She formed the Charon Group, a mercenary outfit of ragtag survivalists and wilderness experts. Anyone in need of a guide, or just looking to throw back a beer and swap stories, could find her camping on the trail or clearing an infestation. The SAM unit that accompanied you spread awareness of the product line's superior sanitation and maintenance capabilities across what was left of the colony. This led to a boost in SAM unit sales. Did you know that SAM units are the longest-lasting, toughest-acting cleaning solution in Halcyon? Minister Clark was released from house arrest, and his contact with you gave him a sense of renewed purpose and vigor. Once it became clear that no help would be coming from Earth, he threw his considerable efforts and talents into helping Halcyon manage the crisis before it. Adjutant Sophia Akande was instrumental in executing the Lifetime Employment Program. Following the death of Chairman Rockwell, Sophia Akande served as the loyal adjutant to her former freelancer, now the most powerful person in Halcyon. With Halcyon's workers suspended in a state of hibernation, starvation and chaos are problems of the past. The Lifetime Employment Program succeeded in its goals, but that success came at a price. The Halcyon of today is nothing at all like the colony of yesteryear. Power remains concentrated in Byzantium, but all the colony's resources serve the lifestyle of the elite, thereby transforming Halcyon into one of the smallest and most exclusive colonies in the system. And what about you, the unplanned variable in the history of Halcyon? You brought an end to the chaos on Tartarus and proved yourself the most capable leader left in the colony. With Sophia Akande as your adjutant, you returned in triumph to Byzantium. All of Halcyon was yours. In time, you demonstrated a talent for leadership that far surpassed your predecessor, Chairman Rockwell. With your steady hand, you guided Halcyon through the turbulent years to follow and helped ensure the colony's survival. No one knows what's happened to Earth, and no one knows what the future has in store for Halcyon. All we know for certain is this: the name of the Unreliable and that of its intrepid captain will remain the subject of countless stories for years to come.